Future Warrior, Dawn of the Deimos. Chapter 3. Once the fleet was formed up and stationary, the fleet's captains, along with Marine and Terra Nova commanders, began the trip to the fleet's flagship, and for what they hoped would be answers to some of the questions they had all been asking themselves since the sudden departure from Earth. Stalker walked down a ramp of a swift foot, following Captain Jansen and Major Marcelino. The captain headed straight for the bridge and the command-level briefing. Stalker and the Major chatted as they walked down some corridors and headed for the assigned Marine and Terra Nova Company commander briefing that would take place after the command-level briefing. Stalker and Marcelino soon saw familiar faces as they reached the adjoining briefing rooms. The corridors were full of fighting men, some wearing black and some wearing tricolor splinter camouflage, and before long both were heavily involved in trying to discover who had the most plausible theory behind the mission. Dee walked into the large, comfortable briefing room on the UES Africa's bridge and was met by a sea of faces in uniforms. Most were the fleet's captains, and they looked at him with open curiosity. They were all in their dress uniforms. Dee had been so rushed by the sudden deployment of his regiment that he had been unable to bring his, but in truth he didn't care. He knew how impressive he looked. He was wearing his full EEA suit complete with his various battle citations and a slung ASBR. The fleet was on a combat mission, and he was ready for combat. He was waved over to a corner where the commander of the 1st Terra Nova was chatting to a Marine colonel, guessing he was the commander of the fleet's Marine units. As he walked, the captains seemed to part like a sea before him, none of them anxious to be in the path of the formidable-looking armored warrior. Dee meet Colonel William Eckhart, commander of the 9th Marine Expeditionary Unit, 3rd Marine Division. As Dee shook his hand in a firm grip, he regarded the colonel. He was a well-built man, Dee judging him to be about his own size. His hair was slightly graying and cut short in the Marine style. His uniform was also like that of all the Marines he had seen, perfect in every way. Dee recalled that there were a total of 12 Marine Expeditionary Units, or MEUs, 3 belonging to each of the 4 Marine divisions in the United Earth Marine Corps, or UEMC. An MEU was structured like a miniature infantry division, lacking heavy armor or mecha, but each having their own engineer, artillery, and logistics units. Dee knew from experience that MEUs as a rule were superbly trained in space combat and were more than capable of taking on any enemy in space or on the varied terrains one encountered on remote planets, moons, and asteroids. The MEU's role within the 10 UEF fleets was twofold. Firstly, they provided the fleet with a highly capable and mobile ground combat force able to seize or destroy ground targets. And secondly, they provided the individual warships defense forces and security. Marine aviators also operated the UEF warships' consignments of space-capable F-55 Dark Star multi-role fighters, the Aviation Combat Element, AC, while the Marine infantry companies provided security against any attempt by an enemy force to board or seize a warship. This, of course, had not occurred in recent memory, not since the bitter wars during the unification of Earth and founding of the UEL. Despite this, the MEUs had proved a valuable resource on numerous occasions in many of the UEF's anti-piracy operations, and indeed the maintenance of a strong fleet and marine force was mandated in the UEL Charter. Admiral Sergei Lev swept into the briefing room, followed by his staff. The captains and Colonel Eckhart snapped to attention and saluted, while the Terra Nova men stood a little straighter. As specialists of the assault divisions, they were not under the direct command of anyone outside of their own division and were reluctant to submit to anyone's authority, even a fleet admiral. Admiral Lev strode straight up to the briefing room's lectern and activated a hollow display of the Pavonis system and the star at its heart, Delta Pavonis. Ladies, gentlemen, you have all been very patient, and I'm glad to say I can finally give you some answers. As you already know, our objective is the Pavonis system and the colonies located around Delta Pavonis. What you don't know is why. Before we left Earth, I had a secure link meeting with Chairwoman Maria Voss, where she informed me of some most disturbing news. A few weeks ago, Fleet TACCOM dispatched the Cerberus to Delta Pavonis to crack down on an increase in piracy in the region, where several cargo transports have been reported lost. She never made it there. There was a deep, still silence around the room. Lev looked around at the faces around him, and apparently satisfied with what he saw, continued. Apart from standard automated tracking signals, we did receive one other communication from the Cerberus before she went off the grid. This communication indicated a probable first contact situation. There was an audible ripple of shock across the room, and Dee leaned forward in his seat, his mind going into overdrive. The signal indicated that the Cerberus encountered several large spacecraft of an unknown design and origin in the Pavoni system. The ship was still in cryo-lockdown at the time. What we do know is that shortly after the initial encounter, the Cerberus and every colony in the Pavoni system fell silent. The facts have been analyzed and support only one possible conclusion, that the contact is real and is hostile. With this information, the Third Fleet has been dispatched to Delta Pavonis. Our mission in the system is threefold. Firstly, we will locate and assess what happened to the Cerberus. Secondly, we will secure and check on the system's colonies. And thirdly, we will assess the nature of the threat and report back to Strat Compost Haste. Lev paused and again sternly examined the faces of the men and women arrayed before him. There was a mixture of shock and conviction. We have a ship down, thousands of citizens out there unprotected, and an unknown, possibly hostile alien threat. I know it sounds amazing and is hard to believe, but we all knew this day might come, and we have a job to do. I expect every one of you to do yours to the utmost in the coming days. Now, to tactics. The fleet will emerge here on the edge of the system. He pointed to a point on the outer rim of the holomap. Once the fleet arrives, we will scan the system for any threats and to locate the Cerberus. Depending on what we find, we will then deploy part of the fleet in teams of 2 and quickly secure the system and its colonies. While this is carried out, a portion of the fleet, led by the Africa, will act as a mobile reserve and hold position around Pavonis Prime in order to provide support in case any of the scout teams encounter the enemy. And make no mistake, if we find them, we will engage them. 30 minutes later, Dee walked out of the meeting, his mind still racing as he tried to process what he had just heard. He shook his head to clear it. As unbelievable as the news was, he now had a mission to achieve. He had to focus. With the 1st Terra and Nova's assault commander and Colonel Eckhart, he headed for the company commander's briefing. As the trio entered the corridor, the clusters of chatting Marines and Terra Nova commanders became silent and looked to them expectantly. Without pausing, they went straight into the briefing room, the others following and filing in to take their seats. The briefing room was small compared to the spacious one on the Africa's bridge, a collection of comfortable benches clustered around a hollow emitter and large view screen. As he walked in, Dee noted Stalker and the 19 other company commanders from the 1st and 2nd Terra Nova. There were also 16 Marine Company commanders present. They quickly and efficiently took their seats, and the commander of the 1st Terra Nova stepped up to address the assembled men. All right, here's the word. We have a possible hostile first contact situation in the Pavoni system. Now I know that's hard to believe, but we don't have time to be surprised. It's the reality. As assault troops and Marines, we have all trained for this possibility. The time has come to put that training into operation. We have a cruiser missing and have lost contact with all of our colonies in the system. Our mission is simple. We will find that ship, secure our colonies, protect the fleet, and assess the threat. Are we clear? There was a resounding yes, sir, from the men in the room. There followed a detailed outline of the individual Marine and Terra Nova companies' roles once they reached the system. Most were tasked with securing colonies or remaining aboard to provide fleet security. Stalker noted with slight trepidation that the Artemis, along with the 21st Terra Nova and Marcelino's I Company Marines, were being deployed to find the Cerberus. The briefing was detailed but short. They only had a brief window before they had to return to their ships. The fleet would not be delayed on its mission for any reason, and anyone who caused a delay would answer personally to Admiral Leviticus. As the meeting broke up, Stalker fell in alongside Dee as they headed for the Africa's bustling landing bays. Dee paused in a quiet passageway and waved Stalker aside. They waited as a few of the others passed. You thinking what I'm thinking, Stalker? Mars, yep. And our old friend Pierce, you believe this shit? I can still recall those tunnels And what he said to me like it was yesterday, this can't be a coincidence. I think you're right. We're the only ones who have seen what we might be facing. Stay frosty out there. You got that damn right. I'm still hoping this is a false alarm. Aliens, I mean holy hell. What was it he called them again? The Deimos, after one of the Martian moons. You know, I looked up what it means. The bloody word means panic. He just shook his head. Watch your back out there, buddy. You too, sir, said Stalker, performing a mock salute. Defroned. Don't start that shit, or I'll give someone else the risky jobs. They shook hands. I'll see you on the flip side, D. They slipped back into the main corridor and headed for their transports, neither feeling any better about the situation. By the time the fleet had reached the second waypoint, it was a hive of activity as the Marine and Terra Nova men trained, driven hard by their respective commanders. The mission details were still restricted below company level, but the men knew something was up and the fleet was awash with rumors. Everything from an intel branch experiment gone wrong to a resurgent Red Legion cult. Stalker and the other commanders let the rumors circulate. It gave the men something to focus on, and gossiping was as old as soldiering. Stalker watched his unit commanders checking their men's gear. The 21st Company was as ready as it had ever been, and the men were lean and hungry for action. Stalker hoped it would be enough. As he watched them, Stalker remembered being in their position. Being a young section commander and then a unit commander had been one of the highlights of his life. Things had been so much simpler back then. Twin flashes of light lit up a dark patch of space on the edge of the Pavonis system as the Artemis and Poseidon emerged from their high-speed run. On the bridge of the Artemis, Captain Jansen looked into the dark space around her ship. It looked like any other she had seen on the dozens of deep space flights she had commanded. Tactical, I want a full senior sweep. Navigation, verify our position. Major Marcelino, deploy your fighters. Command, bring the ship closer to the Poseidon. I want to be able to support her if need be. Captain, sensor sweep is complete. No contacts, the scope is clear. Tactical sweep again. I want to be certain. Yes, Captain. Captain, all fighters have been deployed. They're forming a perimeter at 1,000. Thank you, Major. Captain, our position is verified. We are in our lane. Excellent. Sweep is verified, Captain. Poseidon also concurs. The scope is clear. No contacts within sensor range. Very well. Communications, send the all clear to fleet. Negative contact on arrival. Command, take us forward at 1/2 speed. Communications, any signals, traffic. Negative, Captain. Nothing. The entire system is silent. Sandra Jansen paused, her silence being mirrored by that of the bridge officers around her. She felt a rising tightness in her chest, a ball of nerves she hadn't felt since her days as a junior officer on a UEF frigate. She took a deep breath to calm her nerves. Zero signals traffic wasn't a good sign. Something was very wrong. She could feel it. 5 minutes later, the fleet arrived with a long, rippling series of flashes that blended into one, looking like a lightning storm in the distance. On the bridge of the UES Africa, Admiral Lev stood next to the ship's captain and watched while the captain and crew efficiently ran sweeps and checks and deployed the fleet into a standard defensive formation as per his orders. In minutes, all ships were confirmed in position and were launching their fighters. There still had no communications with the system's colonies and no sign of the Cerberus. He allowed himself a second to reflect on the situation. That they had not detected the Cerberus was not surprising to him, as he had deliberately brought the fleet into Pavonis some distance from the missing ship's last reported position to avoid any possible ambush. But the silence across the system was unnerving. Not even a navigation beacon was registering. He would be careful, he decided. He was not about to risk being caught unawares by unknown forces. Something was out there, and whatever it wasn't friendly. One by one, all ships confirmed ready status and zero contacts, and Admiral Lev began moving to tighten his grip on the surrounding space. Excellent work, Captain. Deploy the fleet. I don't want anything getting in or out of the system without our knowledge. Understood, Admiral, it shall be done. Within moments, parts of the fleet began deploying in pairs and heading for the far corners of the system. Navigation, plot a course for Pavonis Prime. Take us ahead at 2/3. As you wish, Admiral. Ahead 2/3, course plotted. Time seemed to slow for everyone in the fleet. The massive bundle of men and machines coiled tightly, waiting to be unleashed. Time also passed in relative silence. The soldiers and sailors were quiet, and the fleet was on a combat footing, which meant that all non-essential communications were strictly limited. On the bridge of the Artemis and Poseidon, leading the fleet's main body, the sustained tension could have been cut with a knife. The filtered air on the bridge seemed to be thick with it. They were now approaching Pavones Prime, a planet orbiting the star Delta Pavones at the system's core. It was also home to colonies of over 100,000 settlers. Captain Jansen stared intently into space, looking at the star growing slowly brighter, and still everything was silent. She felt like she was almost beginning to grow accustomed to it, but the silence wasn't destined to last. Contact. Possible spacecraft in orbit of Pavones Prime. Can you identify? Negative, Captain. No transponder or IFF, and it is beyond visual range. Appears to be about 2 kilometers in dimension. Communications open a comm channel to the ship across all frequencies. Channel open, Captain. This is the United Earth ship Artemis to unidentified vessel in orbit of Pavones Prime. Hold your current position and identify yourself immediately. If you do not comply, we are authorized to use deadly force. No response, Captain. Captain Jansen felt her fists clench, although she wasn't sure if it was from frustration or nerves. Inform the Africa of the situation. Major, signal your fighters to... Excuse me, Captain, but I don't think that will be necessary. What have you got, command? The ship is not producing any detectable energy signature and is in an unstable orbit. It looks like the Cerberus, Captain. She's dead in space. Admiral Lev had just been about to have his 3rd cup of thick, strong coffee when the news of the Artemis's discovery flashed over the TACnet. He made a quick decision. Communications signal the Artemis to close with and board the Cerberus. Have the Poseidon provide close support. We will hold here until the situation is assessed. Captain Jansen acknowledged the signal and took a seat for a moment. She felt suddenly tired. Major, have your marine fighters push forward. I want them to secure the immediate space around the Cerberus and report on her status. Very good, ma'am. Tactical, I want to know immediately if you detect any other contacts. Keep a weather eye. We're not alone out here. The minutes ticked by as the marine dark stars accelerated to full speed and closed with the drifting Cerberus. Captain, I have one of the Dark Star squadron leaders on the horn. He is in visual contact with the Cerberus. Very good, Major. Communications put him through on bridge loudspeaker. There was a slight crackle as his signal came through. Blue Leader, this is Major Marcelino. You're on the line with the captain. Repeat what you just told me. Roger that, sir. We have secured the surrounding space. I can see the Cerberus clearly now. She looks dead in the water. I am seeing clear signs of battle damage. Impacts look like missile hits rather than energy weapons. The ship is listing to port about 20 degrees. She is lights out, no visible activity. The starboard forward landing bay doors are open. She looks like she had the hell beat out of her, sir. She's a real mess. Sandra Jansen had known this might be likely outcome, but deep inside she had still hoped for an accident or some other cause that would explain the loss of the ship. She tightened her hands back into fists as her anger rose. Someone or something had killed UEDF personnel, and whoever or whatever it was would answer for it. Communications, transfer that report to the Africa. Major, prepare your forces for a tactical insertion through that open landing bay and take the Terra Nova with you. If you find anything on that ship that shouldn't be there, kill it. The Major slipped out of a station on the bridge and began to head for the exit. And Major, he paused and looked back. Captain Jansen remained staring out into space with her 3DSI helmet. Be careful. We have come too far for any mistakes. Sweep the ship, retrieve the ship's black box, search for survivors, and then get out of there. Yes, madam. As the Major exited the bridge, a dark figure fell in alongside him. You ready for this, Commander? Major, the Terra Nova and the 21st Company were born ready. What are you thinking, Commander? Stalker and Marcelino paused at the elevator. Well, the open bay makes our entry easier. How about a 4-ship lift? 2 of yours, 2 of mine. We'll hit the bay with 2 and keep 2 in reserve until we secure the bay and see if it's operational. Sounds like a plan. You know, Major, I've fought on asteroids, Mars, moons, and through cities. Hell, nearly everywhere you could imagine. Can't say I ever expected to be fighting on one of our own ships. You got that damn right. The Major turned suddenly serious. There were 2 companies of Marines on that ship. Stalker looked at the Major. He seemed a changed person from the jovial man he had first met. We'll find them. Dead or alive, they will all be coming home. The 10 leave no one behind. Marcelino turned and looked Stalker in the eye as the lift arrived. Neither do the Marines. I'm glad you boys are here. The Terra Nova can watch my Marines' backs any day. Stalker watched over his men as they boarded Swift-Foot-class transports. They had been on standby and ready for action ever since the Artemis had arrived in the system. He regarded them with the eye of a natural soldier. The extra drills in both space and close-quarters combat had not been a wasted effort. The men were bristling with as much confidence as they were weaponry. Stalker wished he could have told his men more. He trusted them even if the higher-ups didn't. They were soldiers of the 10. As far as he was concerned, their loyalty and trust were beyond question, and they deserved to know what they were facing. He knew Marcelino felt the same way about his boys. They both hated having to send their men into a possible hostile situation without giving them every last scrap of information available. Stalker swore under his breath. The orders came from the very top, and even he was sworn by sacred oath to follow them. But that didn't mean he had to like it. As the last of the men boarded the transport, Stalker gave a wave to the Major, and, with one last look around, followed the final man up the ramp. As he sat back into his G-clamp, he smiled behind his helmet. There was one order they had both decided to break on this mission. Despite orders to the contrary, both his and the Major's transports would be the first 2 that landed on the Cerberus. Stalker recalled something serving under D, and his time as a battle commander had taught him, you can't lead from behind, leaders lead. Stalker hooked into the Swift-Foot's situational awareness interface. On his HUD, the view from a front-mounted external camera came up, and he began to hear the chatter of the pilots as the 4 transports formed up and headed to their target. Starling 2, this is Starling Leader, switching to terminal guidance. Starling 3, keep it tight now, you're drifting slightly. Stalker saw the shape of the Cerberus appear in the distance. She looked derelict. As they got closer, he began to make out finer details. He could see impact holes in her hull, and she was surrounded by a small field of floating debris. Starling Leader to Arrow, we are on finals. Everyone look sharp. Starling 3 and 4 prepare to break and set up a holding pattern once we pass around her nose. Stalker saw the sleek silhouette of an escorting dark star pass close by and peel off, showing the bright blue exhaust from its modified plasma engines. They passed close to the bridge of the Cerberus, and Stalker strained, but couldn't see inside. Everything was dark. As they passed around the front of the massive ship, the transport dipped slightly to avoid some free-floating debris. Stalker caught sight of the open landing bay. It looked like a giant mouth waiting to swallow the small transports. Starling 3 and 4 break. Break, on approach, 30 seconds, good luck, boys. Stalker watched the nose-mounted camera footage as the pilot expertly maneuvered his craft through the open bay doors at breakneck speed and in perfect coordination with his wingman pivoted around and landed in the center of the massive bay. There was a rapid high-pitch hiss, and the pressures equalized, and Stalker popped the cord from his suit socket and stood just as the ramp opened. A small icon in the bottom of Stalker's HUD showed the red letters LG. His EEA, like the rest of the Terra Nova and the Marines' modified SBA, were set to the low-gravity setting. This engaged suction systems on the soldiers' boots and a slight electrical field. The result was that they didn't float freely in the zero-gravity environment, and it allowed them to move with some degree of normalness, although they were still far from being near normal gravity conditions. Move. Ami 21st, secure the bay. Stalker bounded down the ramp in big free-flowing leaps, followed by a wave of black armored men. They would have looked comical if there had been any casual observers in the hangar bay as the big black armored men bounded lightly in exaggerated leaps. but their movements were deliberate and their intent deadly as they moved with confident, rapid fluidness to secure the bay's controls and entrances. All entrances secure, boss. Very good, Link. Hold fast. Major, what's the situation? Door controls have been jammed open. We are bypassing by hot wiring the controls. Wait out. Stalker looked around him. The 100 or so men he had arrived with had fanned out in their units to cover roughly half the bay. The Marines had seized the other half. The landing bay itself was an impressive size and was the mirror image of the one he had left only minutes before. The key difference being that this one was strewn with floating debris, unlike the antiseptically clean one of the Artemis. There was a sudden hissing sound, and flashing amber lights lit up the darkened bay. The comm net crackled to life. Alpha 2-1, we have control of the doors. Closing now. All received. The massive doors bay slid shut and locked closed with surprising silence and speed. As soon as the doors were closed, Stalker felt the gravity begin to change as the pressure release valves automatically opened and began to equalize the pressure with the rest of the ship. Stalker jogged over to the opposite sides of the hangar, where Marcelino was standing by Marine Tech that was using a portable computer connected into a wall panel amongst a maze of wiring. What's the situation, Major? We can't seem to connect to the main computer. It's damn strange, but we did manage to access a backup system to operate the doors. Any idea on the status of the rest of the ship? Does it have atmosphere? Marcelino looked to the tech, who punched a few of the small keys on his computer, and data began to whirl across the screen. Hard to say, sir. I'm having trouble accessing the internal monitoring system without the main computer. The parts one can read indicate stable atmosphere, but I wouldn't recommend taking your helmet off, duly noted Corporal. All right, Major. What do you say we get it done? You head for the bridge via the starboard passages. I'll make my way to the port side and head up to meet you there. Done deal, Commander. All breach teams get ready. Link, get our units ready to breach. Bravo, and Charlie with us. All other units are to sweep forward and clear the other decks. Roger that, boss. Stalker hurried back over to where Link and the others were forming up around one of the large exit doors. All right, Link, I'm on point. I want Bravo right behind. We head straight for the bridge, clear? The others in the company command unit, or CCU, threw Link a look, but Link knew better than to argue. Stalker had always led his company from the front. Link shouldered his eliminator and drew his Z9. Clear, boss. Are the doors ready? One of the men who had attached a small power cell to the door's wiring answered without looking up. Ready, Commander. Major, breaching in 30 seconds. Stalker glanced around at the black armored men of his company. Anything alive and hostile on this ship was about to have a bad day. The seconds ticked away. Breaching. Without the normal hiss of compressed air, the doors opened silently, running instead on their backup electronic override circuitry. Stalker moved forward, Link and the other units close behind. Cold entry. No contact. Watch your spacing, people. Don't bunch up. The first thing Stalker noted as he entered the ship was the eerie purple glow of emergency chemical lighting that bathed the corridor. It was dim, but not dim enough for the EEA to automatically switch to night vision. The corridor ahead was clear, and using his rifle cam, Stalker peered around the first corner. Nothing. He moved on, passing several closed hatches before reaching an elevator and stairwell. The ship seemed as quiet as a tomb. Link and the first unit moved up and covered him as he gently opened the doors to the stairwell. A quick check revealing nothing but stairs. Bravo. Charlie, let's go. Everyone else, you know what to do. Move out and stay frosty. Without waiting, Stalker moved quietly up the stairs, heading for the command level and the bridge. He had gone up 2 levels when, as he took a step, his armored boot knocked something off the stair, and it skittered downwards, the metallic echo sounding hideously loud in the confined space of the stairwell. The small object made it down several steps before Link nimbly grabbed it. Everyone tensed as the echo died away, but no new sound emerged to replace it. The ship around them remained as silent as it had since they had come aboard. Stalker looked back at Link questioningly while silently cursing himself for such an amateurish mistake. Link brought it up to his helmet and looked at it briefly before carefully placing it to one side. Empty 9mm case, boss. Weapons have been fired in here. Stalker looked at the steps ahead and saw several more scattered casings. There's more up ahead. Watch your footing, everyone. Stalker moved up a little further and peered up at the access door to the next level. Unlike the previous two, he had passed this one was half open. Unconsciously, his grip on his ASBR tightened. Stalker moved up to the door and gingerly looked through the gap. It was instantly obvious that something had gone terribly wrong. The visible corridor was a shattered wreck. The corridor walls were peppered with impact from weapons fire. The floor was littered with spent casings, and there were ominous dark stains on the walls and floor. It was also obvious to Stalker that whatever had happened, that he and his men had missed it. Cradling his ASBR in one hand, Stalker activated one of his numerous arm-mounted controls. Instantly, his helmet's vision system flicked over to a different mode, and an entirely more ghastly picture was revealed. Before him, the corridor was bathed in a bright fluorescent shade of scarlet, as the advanced sensors in his helmet displayed the presence of bioorganic material. The sensor mode was a new addition in the latest MK7 version of the Commander's EA helmet, and Stalker wasn't entirely sure he liked what it was telling him. The corridor was bathed in blood. In the luminescent light, he could clearly make out drag marks on the floor, bloody footprints, and here and there on the walls were handprints. Stalker adjusted his weight uneasily, tiny ice crystals on the stairwell floor crunching in response. The corridor had clearly seen some bloody action. He flicked his vision mode back to automatic. They moved up several more levels, finding no one and nothing, but the higher they got, the more signs of combat they found. On the level below the command level, Deck 9, the shaft door was riddled with bullet holes, and a long stream of dried blood ran down the steps at their feet. Stalker paused at the door to Deck 8, command level. I don't want to get bunched up in here, so we disperse quick. Nothing fancy. Everyone's set. Stalker glanced back at the service stairwell. It was full of dangerous-looked black armored soldiers. None spoke. Everyone was ready, like a coiled spring awaiting the freedom of release. Stalker softly breathed the command, "Moving, go, go." In one smooth movement, Stalker opened the door and brought his rifle up, scanning back and forth for threats as he moved, but finding none. Behind him, the others of the Command, Bravo, and Charlie units, led by Link, poured out with silky smoothness and secured the immediate area. "Major, this is Alpha 2-1. We have reached the target level. Roger that, 2-1. We're 2 levels down. Had to take an alternate route. Lots of damage over here." All received, 2-1 out. Link, go with Charlie. Cut across to the opposite corridor and sweep forward to the bridge. I'll meet you there with Bravo. Link didn't reply. He just turned on his heel, and with the men of Charlie 2-1 behind him, moved out in the opposite direction, looking for a crossover passage to the other side of the deck. Everyone else, tactical advance. Let's get it done. They moved on at a steady walking pace. Stalker ignored the hatches and rooms as he passed, as behind him they were rapidly checked and cleared by Bravo, the assault troops pausing only long enough to determine there was no threat before moving on. As Stalker moved, his eyes constantly searched for any resistance. The passageways were filled with debris of all types, bits of clothing, spent casings, twisted frayed wiring, and here and there were more dark stains and splashes. Stalker also noticed something more unusual. At a few spots, there were small dark scorch marks on walls and doors, the steel appearing melted. They looked like weapons impacts, but Stalker knew that nothing the Marines used could have made them. "Link, how's your progress?" "I'm coming up to the bridge." "Almost there. Won't be far behind you." All received. Stalker slowed as he came up to the passageway that led to the bridge access doors. The signs of a battle were intensifying, and Stalker saw evidence of explosive damage and shrapnel. As Stalker moved forward, something caught his eye, and he froze. A grenade had gone off in the narrow confines of the passage, and pieces of shrapnel were embedded in the wall. It wasn't the shrapnel that caught his attention, though. Amongst it in the wall, there was something else embedded. It looked like a piece of bone. Stalker looked closer and, reaching up, carefully removed it from the wall with a quick jerk and brought it up to his face for a closer look. It wasn't what he expected. In his hand was what he could only describe as a claw. It was about 2 inches long. It also looked like it had a keen edge. Something in Stalker's memory clicked, and he spun to look back where he had retrieved it from. There were a series of vertical scratches in the steel wall. Stalker looked back at the wicked-looking claw in his hand and saw the ground at his feet. He was standing in a thin layer of black dust that he somehow knew confirmed his worst fears. He felt his chest tighten, and he squeezed the claw in his hand to focus himself. There would be a time to think on this later. He couldn't let his men see any doubt or weakness. They were depending on him. He quickly slipped the claw into a thigh pouch. Stalker looked at the men stopped behind him. Their skull helmets revealed nothing. They seemed to be motionless, almost statues as they waited for their commander to move. With a silent wave, Stalker moved up and stole a look in the direction of the bridge blast doors. To his surprise, the heavy reinforced doors were a twisted wreck, a shattered bridge visible beyond their battered remnants. The commnet suddenly crackled to life. It was Link. 30 seconds, ET. Roger that, Link. I'm clearing the bridge now. Come in heavy behind us. Stalker swept into the bridge, but like everywhere else on the ship, it was deserted. The blast doors were embedded in the opposite wall, and the bridge workstations were shattered. As Stalker stood in the middle of the bridge, he suddenly noticed something very odd. Not everything was there. He turned slowly, trying to remember what the bridge of the Artemis looked like. Even with the destruction, the bridge of the Cerberus looked decidedly hollow. This is Alpha 2-1. All units sound off and sit rep. Stalker listened to the quick-fire replies. All his units reported negative contact in the areas they had cleared and that they were pushing on to other areas. They also reported signs of battle damage. The ship seemed abandoned, but her crew had not gone quietly. Stalker swore under his breath to no one in particular, this thoughts churning. Where the hell were the crew, the Marines, the bodies? His thoughts were broken as Link arrived alone. Stalker looked up. Link, as if reading his thoughts, spoke. I posted Charlie to secure the approaches to the bridge until Marcelino and his Marines get here. Stalker nodded his approval and motioned Link closer. Hey, Link, what do you make of this? Stalker passed him the claw. Link's expression was unfathomable behind his scout sniper issue EEA helmet, but Stalker saw his shoulders tighten after a moment as he looked at it carefully, and he shifted his weight to his other foot as he considered what he was looking at. When he finally spoke, Link's voice sounded monotone and expressionless. Where did you find it? It was embedded in a wall. A grenade had gone off, and there were what looked like scratch marks in the steel. Shit. Link shook his head slowly. I knew this might happen, but I always held out hope it never would. God knows what else we will find out here. Stalker put a hand on his friend's shoulder. God, Link? This is deep space. God left this place a long time ago. 5 minutes later, Marcelino and his Marines arrived, looking more than a little frustrated that they had been beaten to the prize of taking the bridge. As he walked up to him, Stalker noticed that Marcelino was looking around the shattered remains of the bridge in confusion. So, it's not just me, Major. There is something missing from this picture. I know you assault types are legendary for appropriating equipment, but this is ridiculous. What have you done with the bridge controls? Stalker laughed. We're good, but we're not that good, Major. What's missing? Marcelino took a careful look around. All of the main control consoles are gone, as are the hollow emitters for the display and the 3 DSI system equipment. The Major waved a pair of his techs over who began to pull off a wall panel and then connected their portable computers to the exposed terminals. One of the techs gave the waiting commanders a running commentary. We're patching into a subsystem. It monitors the main computer and records basic activity, just like a black box on an aircraft. Okay, we're in. Authenticating. There was a pause of several seconds, and Stalker was about to ask if there was a problem when the tech suddenly started talking again. Okay, accessing the main computer's log. Shit, sir. This explains a lot. The main computer's sabotage protocols have been tripped. The main memory cores and operating systems have been fused. The tech looked up and, seeing Marcelino's blank look, hurriedly went on. Someone tried to hack into the system from the inside, probably from one of the bridge command consoles. They tried to bypass the computer's defenses, and while bypassing the command authentication barriers, they tripped one of the latent security mines. The emergency sabotage protocol was activated, which destroyed the system. What's a latent security mine? The tech looked to Stalker. It's a classified piece of security software, sir. LSMs act as independent programs inside our key computer systems. Because they're separate standalone programs from the systems they protect, they are damn near impossible to detect until it's too late. They effectively act like a real landmine. Someone hacking into a system, being where they shouldn't be, could trip one. The resulting virus destroys the system and all information on it, rendering it useless to anyone trying to steal classified information. They're only deployed deep in the most classified parts of our key operating systems. Someone must have gotten pretty far to set one off, sir. Alpha 2-1, this is Echo 2-1. Echo, this is Alpha Send. We have completed our sweep. Currently in engineering, we found something odd down here, Commander. What you got, Echo? It's the engines. All the key systems have been torn out. Roger that, Echo. Wait out. Major, engineering has been stripped as well. Damn, looks like someone took everything of intelligence value. Our orders are clear, Major. We have done all we can here. Let's exfil. Sound good, Commander. All Marine units fall back to the entry point. Alpha 2-1 to all units. Fall back. Say again, fall back to the hangar. We're leaving. As one stalker and the others began to fall back to the hangar bay. They moved fast, but everyone remained on edge. No one, it seemed, felt entirely comfortable on the Cerberus. As Stalker moved, he spoke to his teams, checking on their progress and getting detailed update of what they had found on their sweeps. The stories were all the same. The ship was abandoned. There were signs in some areas that furious battles had raged in the ship's confined passageways. Various pieces of equipment and weaponry had been removed, and no one reported finding any sign of the crew or Marines that had sailed on the Cerberus. As he moved, Stalker thought of the claw fragment he found in the wall and now carried in a pouch on his thigh. Stalker felt he could feel its weight slowing him down, as if it was a vast burden dragging him down and laboring his every step. It was something so small, but he knew it was in reality something much larger. It was a vital piece of evidence, and he had to see it to the right hands.